I folded the letter and set it down on the desk. My hands were steady. My heart was steady. I felt nothing, no anger.
No sadness.
No guilt. I remembered the last time I had received a letter like this. In my past life, I had read it in my cell, my wrists still raw from the shackles. I had wept. I had believed every word. I had thought my aunt loved me. I had thought the family would take me back if I just sacrificed enough. I had been wrong. I picked up the letter and read it again. The words were the same. The desperation was the same. The lies were the same. Please, Rosalind, do this for us. She wasn't asking me to come home. She was asking me to come die. That was what it meant to take the blame.
Exile. Cold.
Hunger. The slow, agonizing decay of a body that no one cared to save. I had lived it. I had died it. And I was never, ever going to live it again. I took a piece of parchment and dipped my pen in ink. My reply was short. Asterisk, dear aunt. Asterisk, asterisk, I am no longer a member of the Hazelwood family. I have no obligation to you, or to Elena. I will not be returning. Asterisk. I wish you the best. Asterisk, Rosalind, asterisk, I sealed it with wax and handed it to the courier. He looked at me strangely, but said nothing. I paid him double and sent him on his way. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The office was small, cluttered with ledgers and maps. The walls were bare. The window overlooked the river. I was free. But I wasn't safe. Not yet. The Hazelwoods wouldn't accept my refusal. They would come looking for me. They would try to force me. They would use every weapon in their arsenal. Guilt, fear, threats. They didn't care about me. They only cared about their reputation. And Elena was their favorite. Their golden girl. Their precious, delicate flower. I had to be ready. The first attempt came 3 days later. I was returning to my lodging after a meeting with a grain merchant. The streets were quiet, the lamps being lit by the lamplighters. I walked quickly, my cloak pulled tight, my hand resting on the small knife I kept in my pocket. I heard footsteps behind me, 2 of them. Heavy, unmistakable, that I didn't turn around. I kept walking, but I angled my route toward the market square. More people there. More witnesses. The footsteps sped up. I broke into a run. I reached the square, the torchlight pooling in patches, and ducked behind a fountain. I pressed my back against the cold stone and held my breath. The 2 men emerged from the alley. They were big, broad-shouldered, dressed in plain wool. They looked around, searching. One of them pointed toward the bridge. They moved on. I stayed behind the fountain for a long time, my heart pounding against my chest. My hands were shaking. I was not a fighter. I had never been a fighter. I had to be smarter. I had to be faster. I needed protection. The next day, I hired a guard. His name was Marcus. He was a retired soldier, tall and lean, with a face full of scars and a voice like gravel. He had fought in the border wars, lost an eye, and walked away with a pension that barely fed him. He was loyal, quiet, and deadly. Your enemies, he asked when I explained the situation. My former family, I said. They want to force me to take the blame for a crime I didn't commit. He nodded. How far are they willing to go? Far enough to send men to abduct me. He considered this. I'll need more coin. You'll have it. We shook hands. It was the beginning of a partnership that would last for years. The second attempt came a week later. This time they tried to corner me in my office. I was working late, going through accounts by candlelight. The building was quiet. The guards downstairs were having their dinner. I heard the creak of the floorboards. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his hand on his sword. Company, he said. I blew out the candle. The room went dark. I pressed myself against the wall and waited. Marcus moved into the hall. There was the sound of footsteps, the grunt of a struggle, then a heavy thud. Then silence. Marcus came back. 2 men. I knocked them out. They're tied up in the back room. Who sent them, they didn't say. But they had this. He handed me a piece of paper. It was a letter, sealed with the Hazelwood crest. The same crest I had seen 1,000 times before. I opened it. Asterisk, Rosalind. Asterisk, asterisk, I implore you, for the sake of our blood, to reconsider. Elena is in anguish. She cannot bear this burden. You were always the stronger one. You were always the one who could endure. Please, I beg you, come home. Speak to the council. Take the punishment meant for her. We will never forget your sacrifice. Asterisk. Your aunt. I crumpled the letter and threw it into the hearth. Burn it, I told Marcus. Burn everything they send. He looked at me for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. He watched me in silence. He had seen many things in his years of war, betrayal, grief, cruelty. But he had never seen someone so utterly unmoved by a plea from their own blood. You made the right choice, he said at last. I've seen families tear each other apart for less. I nodded. I know. I went back to my ledger and continued my calculations. The numbers soothed me. They were clean. They were predictable. They didn't lie and they didn't beg. It was midnight by the time I finished. Marcus was stationed at the door, his sword across his knees. I looked at him and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, you can sleep, I said. I'll take first watch. He shook his head. I'm paid to watch. You're paid to plan. I almost smiled. The third attempt was the last, that it wasn't an abduction. It wasn't a letter. It was a visitor. My aunt came to Rivermouth herself. I was in the office when the door opened. Marcus entered, followed by a woman I hadn't seen in months. She was dressed in gray silk, her face pale and lined with worry. Her hands were clasped in front of her, trembling. She looked older than I remembered. Much older. Rosalind, she said. Aunt. She walked toward me. I didn't move. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Please, she said. Please, just listen to me. I don't have to listen to anything, I said. I told you I'm not coming back. I told you I'm not taking the blame. Elena is going to be executed. The council has found her guilty. The sentence is death by hanging. I felt nothing. That's not my problem. She's your cousin. She's your blood. Blood didn't help me when I was in chains, I said. Blood didn't help me when I was starving in the north. Blood didn't write to me, or visit me, or save me from dying alone in a frozen trench. My aunt stared at me. Her face was a mask of disbelief. What are you talking about? She whispered. You've never been to the north. You've never been in chains.
No.
Not yet. Not in this life. But I remembered. I remembered everything. I know what would happen if I went back, I said. I know what would happen if I took the blame. I would be exiled. I would be sent north. I would freeze and starve and rot. And no one would come for me. No one. Rosalind. I'm not going to save her. I stood up. I was taller than my aunt now. Stronger. I'm not going to save any of you. You made your choices. You let her run wild. You indulged her every whim. And now you want me to pay for it. Please, get out. My aunt's face crumbled. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and looked at me with cold, hard eyes. If you don't help her, she said, you will never be welcome in the Hazelwood family again. I laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. I stopped being welcome the day my parents died. I said, I was never family to you. I was a burden, a charity case. And I'm not going to keep paying for the crime of not being dead. My aunt walked to the door. She paused and looked back at me. You're a monster, she said. No, I replied. I'm just someone who's not willing to die for you anymore. She left. Marcus closed the door behind her and looked at me. You handled that well, he said. I had a lot of practice. He nodded slowly. What now? I walked to the window and looked out over the river. The water was dark, the moon silver on its surface. I thought about Elena, standing in a cell, waiting for the noose. I thought about my aunt, trudging back to her carriage with empty hands. I thought about all the years I had spent in that tiny room in the East Wing, always grateful for scraps, always apologizing for existing, and I felt nothing. Now, I said. Now we go on living. The weeks after my aunt's visit were quiet. I threw myself into work. The Thornwood Company was growing faster than I had anticipated. The mining rights were generating steady income. The silk trade had expanded into wool and spices. I had agents in 3 cities, and my name was beginning to carry weight. But I didn't sleep well. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every glance, every word my aunt had said. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had moved on. But the memories kept coming back, unbidden, unwelcome. I remembered Elena at 6 years old, tugging at my sleeve, asking me to play with her in the garden. I remembered her at 12, crying on my shoulder because her mother had scolded her. I remembered her at 16, laughing as she danced at the harvest ball, her face bright with joy. I remembered the girl she used to be, and I remembered the woman she had become. It wasn't hatred that I felt. It was something colder, something closer to resignation. I had loved Elena once. I had loved her like a sister, and she had let me take the fall without a second thought. She had stood in the great hall and pointed her finger at me. She had cried and said she was confused, that she had been afraid, that she had only followed me because she trusted me. She had lied, and I had died. I closed my eyes and tried to push the thoughts away. It didn't work. The past was stubborn. It clung like frost. One evening, Marcus brought me news. The Hazelwoods are in trouble, he said. The council has postponed Elena's execution. They're giving her more time to prepare her defense. Her defense is that I should take the blame, I said. That's not a defense.
No.
But they've hired a lawyer, a man named Whitmore. He's good at what he does. I sat up straighter. Whitmore, the one who defends traitors, the same. He's expensive, and he's ruthless. He'll do whatever it takes to get her acquitted. I thought for a moment, including framing me. Marcus nodded. That's what I wanted to warn you about. They might try to fabricate evidence, letters, witnesses, anything to shift suspicion onto you. Let them try, I said. I'm not in Hazelwood territory. I'm protected here. Protected isn't the same as safe. He was right. I had to be careful. I had to be prepared. That I spent the next few days reviewing my defenses. I sealed every document. I hired additional guards. I memorized the routes of every patrol in the city. I wasn't going to let them catch me off guard, but the attack came from somewhere I didn't expect. I received an invitation to a dinner party. It was hosted by a merchant named Silas Thorne, one of the wealthiest men in Rivermouth. I had done business with him once or twice, but I didn't know him well. His letter was polite, even flattering. He said he was eager to meet the woman behind the Thornwood Company. I almost declined. But Marcus convinced me to go. It's an opportunity, he said. You need allies. Influential ones. A dinner party is the perfect place to make connections. I relented. I wore my finest dress, a deep blue silk that had cost me a month's profits. I pinned my mother's ring to my collar, where it gleamed in the candlelight. I arrived at the Thorns' mansion with Marcus at my side, my head held high. The party was lavish. The guests were wealthy. I smiled and mingled and made small talk about trade routes and wool prices. I was careful not to reveal too much, but I revealed enough to impress. And then I saw her, Elena. She was standing near the fireplace, dressed in pale gold, her hair piled high in the latest fashion. She looked thinner than I remembered, paler. Her eyes were shadowed, her smile brittle. But she was still beautiful. She was always beautiful. That I froze up. Marcus touched my arm. Don't react, he murmured. She came to provoke you. I forced my face into a mask of calm. I turned away and made conversation with the person next to me. But I could feel Elena's eyes on my back. I could feel her moving closer. Rosalind. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. I turned. Elena.
She reached for my hand.
I pulled it away. Please, she said. Please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. There is. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. I know what you think of me. I know you think I'm selfish. I know you think I let you down. But I was scared. I was so scared. You were scared. I repeated flatly, yes. The council was going to execute me. My mother was crying every night. I didn't know what else to do. You didn't know what else to do, so you told them I was the one who met the scout. She flinched. I didn't know they'd send you north. I didn't know it would be that bad.
East her.
She looked sincere. She always looked sincere. That was her gift. I'm not going to forgive you. I said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for help. One last time.
Please, Rosalind.
I'm going to die if you don't help me. Then die. The words came out flat even. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cruel. I was just done. Elena stared at me. Her eyes filled with tears. But I didn't believe them. They were the same tears she had shed in the Great Hall. The same tears she had used to make me look like the guilty one. You don't mean that, she whispered. I mean every word. I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to take your place. I'm not going to give you one more piece of myself.
Elena's face crumpled.
For a moment I thought she might collapse. But then her expression hardened. The tears vanished. Her eyes turned cold.
Fine, she said.
If that's how you want to be. It's how I am. She stepped back. You'll regret this. I swear it. You'll regret it. She turned and walked away and I stood there, my heart pounding, my hands trembling slightly. Marcus appeared at my side. She's not going to give up, he said. She's desperate. Let her be desperate. I'm not going to be her scapegoat. We left the party early. The backlash started the next morning. A rumor began to spread through the merchant circles of Rivermouth. I heard it first from one of my agents, then from a second, then from 3 more. They were saying that I had been responsible for the Northern Scout, that I had been the one to betray the Hazelwoods, that I had fled the estate to escape punishment. It was a lie, a complete lie. But it was also a perfect mirror of the story Elena had told the council. And now she was telling it again in a different setting, to a different audience. She was trying to destroy my reputation. That I called a meeting with my closest associates. We sat around my office table, the candles guttering in the draft. She's trying to ruin you, Marcus said. She knows she can't force you to take the fall legally. So she's trying to do it socially. It won't work, I said. I have proof that I was nowhere near the Scout. I have witnesses. I have documents. Do you have proof that she was the one of my agents asked? And I paused. I had the letter from my aunt, but that was hearsay. It didn't prove Elena's guilt. It only proved my aunt's desperation. No, I admitted. I don't have proof. Then you need to find some. I spent the next week digging. I sent messages to old servants, to guards, to anyone who had been at the estate during the Scout's visit. I offered money for information. I threatened legal action against those who refused to cooperate. Slowly, painfully, I pieced together the truth that Elena had met the Scout 3 times. She had written him 7 letters. She had promised to help him smuggle weapons across the border, and she had kept copies of every single letter. I didn't know where she kept them, but I knew someone who did. Her mate, an old woman named Marjorie, who had raised Elena since childhood. Marjorie had once been kind to me. She had brought me bread when I was locked in my room, had held my hand when I cried. She had never been part of the family's cruelty. She was just a woman doing her job. I went to see her. She was living in a small cottage on the outskirts of Rivermouth, living on a small pension from the Hazelwoods. Her face was lined and tired, but her eyes were sharp. Miss Rosalind, she said when she saw me. I wondered when you'd come. You knew I would. I hoped you would. I've seen what they do to you. I've never approved of it. I sat down across from her. I need your help, Marjorie. I need to find Elena's letters. She nodded slowly. I know where they are. She keeps them in a box in her chamber, under the floorboards. She's had them for years. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because I was afraid. And because I didn't think you'd ever have the courage to fight back. I reached into my pouch and set a small bag of coins on the table. This is for you. It's enough to live on for a long time. Just tell me how to get the letters. Marjorie looked at the coins. Then she looked at me. I'll tell you, she said. And I'll testify in court if I have to. You deserve to be free, Miss Rosalind. You deserve to live. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I blinked them back. Thank you, I said. Thank you. I left Marjorie's cottage with a map and a plan. I was going to steal the letters. And then I was going to destroy Elena once and for all. The plan was simple. I would return to the Hazelwood estate under the cover of darkness. I would enter Elena's chamber through the servants' staircase. I would lift the floorboards, find the box, and take the letters. Then I would leave before anyone knew I had been there. The execution was anything but simple. I spent 3 days preparing. I studied the estate layout from memory, drawing and redrawing it until every corridor was burned into my mind. I timed the guard rotations based on what Marjorie had told me. I assembled a small kit, a crowbar, a candle, a set of lockpicks, and a dark cloak that blended with the night. Marcus offered to come with me. I refused. "This is my fight," I said. "I have to do it alone."
He didn't argue.
He just handed me a small blade and said, "In case the crowbar isn't enough." I left Rivermouth at dusk, riding a horse I had rented from a stable that asked no questions. The road to Hazelwood was familiar, every bend and hollow etched into my memory from a lifetime of travel. But this time I wasn't fleeing. I was hunting that the manor appeared on the horizon as the moon rose. It looked the same as ever, cold, imposing, unwelcoming. The windows were dark except for a few scattered candles. The guards were at their posts, but they were lazy, their attention dulled by years of routine. I circled around to the east wing, where the servants' staircase emerged into a narrow alley. I tied my horse to a tree and crept forward, my footsteps silent on the damp grass. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside. The servants' corridor was dim and musty, the walls lined with old tapestries and cobwebs. I moved quickly, counting the steps to Elena's chamber. 12 paces to the first turn, 8 to the second. Then the third door, on the left. I pressed my ear to the wood. Silence. I pushed it open. Elena's room was larger than I remembered, filled with expensive furniture and silken drapes. The bed was enormous, its canopy embroidered with gold thread. A vanity covered in perfumes and powders stood against the far wall. But I wasn't here for the luxury. I crossed to the corner where Marjorie had said the floorboards were loose. I knelt down, running my fingers along the seams. The third board gave way slightly under my pressure. I pried it up with a crowbar, careful not to make too much noise. There was a box. It was small, made of dark wood, bound with iron straps. I lifted it out and examined the lock. It was simple, the kind that could be opened with a single pick. I worked quickly, my fingers steady, and the lock clicked open. Inside were letters. 7 of them, folded and sealed with Elena's personal crest. I pulled out the first one and read it by the light of my candle. Asterisk to the scout of the northern tribes. Asterisk, asterisk, you have my word that I will arrange safe passage for your goods. The Hazelwood patrols are lax in the autumn months. I will send word when the moon is dark. Asterisk. My hands trembled slightly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elena's elegant, looping script. The same script she had used to write me letters when we were children, asking me to keep her secrets. That I had kept her secrets. All of them. And this was what it had cost me. I folded the letters and tucked them into my cloak. I closed the box, replaced the floorboard, and stood up. The room was the same as I had found it. No trace of my visit. I was about to leave when I heard footsteps in the corridor. My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, behind the curtain, my hand closing around the blade Marcus had given me. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then the door swung open. Elena walked in. She was still in her evening dress, her face flushed with the warmth of the fire downstairs. She crossed to the vanity and sat down, beginning to unlace her bodice. I held my breath, hoping she wouldn't notice the slight disturbance in the floorboards, but she didn't look down. She unbuttoned her dress, let it fall to the floor, and pulled on a nightgown. She was humming softly, a tune I recognized from our childhood. Then she turned toward the bed. She saw me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. She stared at me, her eyes wide, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. I stared back, my hand still on the blade, my heart pounding in my throat. "Rosalind," her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" I stepped out from behind the curtain. "You know what I'm doing here." She looked at my cloak, at the bulge where the letters were hidden. Her face went white. "You took them," she said. "You took my letters." "Your letters?" I repeated. "The ones where you promised to help the northern tribes. The ones that prove you betrayed the Hazelwoods." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I was in love with him. You were reckless. You were selfish. And when you got caught, you blamed me."
Elena's face crumpled.
For a moment, she looked like the girl I had grown up with. The girl who had cried on my shoulder and held my hand in the garden. The girl I had loved. Please, she said. Please don't show them to the council. Why shouldn't I? Because I'm your cousin. Because we're family. Because you used to love me. I looked at her. Really looked. And I saw the fear behind her eyes. The desperation. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she had been caught. She was sorry she had lost control of a story. I used to love you, I said. But you killed that love. You killed it the day you pointed your finger at me in the Great Hall. You killed it when you let them send me north. You killed it when you didn't write. You killed it when you didn't visit. You killed it when you let me die. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier not to know. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. I'm going to give these letters to the council, I said. I'm going to tell them the truth. And if they hang you, that's on you. Elena's face changed. The fear vanished, replaced by something colder, harder. She stood up straighter, and for the first time, I saw the steel beneath the silk. If you do that, she said, I'll tell them you forced me to write those letters. I'll tell them you were the one with the Northern Scout all along. I'll tell them you made me lie for you. They won't believe you. They will, because I'm the one they trust. I'm the one they love. You're just the orphan cousin. The charity case. The one who is always a little strange, a little distant, a little too clever for her own good. I felt the anger building in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I kept my face calm, my voice steady. Try it, I said. I have witnesses. I have Marjorie. I have the letters. And I have nothing left to lose. Elena stared at me. She was searching for a crack, a weakness, anything she could exploit. But there was nothing. I had already lost everything once. There was nothing left to take. I'll destroy you, she whispered. I swear I'll destroy you. You've already tried. You didn't succeed. I turned and walked to the door. Elena didn't follow. She stood in the middle of the room, her hands clenched at her sides, her face twisted with rage. I didn't look back. I left the estate the way I had come. The horse was still tethered to the tree, waiting. I mounted and rode back to Rivermouth, the letters pressed against my chest, warm with the heat of my body. Dawn was breaking when I arrived. Marcus was waiting at the office, his face lined with worry. He saw the letters in my hand and let out a long, slow breath. You got them. Every one. He looked at me carefully. You're shaking.
Fine.
But I wasn't fine. I was trembling, my hands unsteady, my legs weak. I sat down heavily in my chair and pressed my palms against the desk. Elena's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, I'll destroy you. I swear I'll destroy you. Asterisk, I believed her. She was desperate, and she was dangerous. But I was desperate too. And I had something she didn't have, the truth, that I spent the next morning making copies of the letters. I sealed the originals in a leather pouch and handed them to Marcus. Take these to the council. Don't let anyone else touch them. He nodded. And what will you do? I'll wait. I waited for 3 days. On the third day, a messenger arrived from the Hazelwood estate. The council had reviewed the letters. They had summoned Elena for a second trial. She had confessed to everything. The sentence was exile. Not to the north, but to the southern provinces. She would live among strangers for the rest of her life, never to return. It was a lighter punishment than death. But it was enough. My aunt wrote me a letter. It was short and cold. Asterisk, you have what you wanted. I hope you're satisfied. Asterisk, I wrote back. Asterisk, I am. Asterisk, I didn't hear from the Hazelwoods again. The newspaper said that Elena had left the city in chains, her golden hair shorn, her face streaked with tears. The family's reputation was ruined. I read the article and folded it. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt freed. The days that followed were strange, not bad. Just strange. I woke up each morning and waited for the weight to settle on my chest. The familiar dread that had accompanied me for as long as I could remember. But it didn't come. The space where it used to live was empty, and I didn't know what to fill it with. I threw myself into work. The Thornwood Company expanded. I opened new trade routes, secured new contracts, hired new agents. The money flowed in faster than I could count. I bought a house near the river, a proper house with high ceilings and large windows. I filled it with books and maps and things that made me feel something other than empty. Marcus stayed with me. He became more than a guard. He became a friend. The only friend I had ever truly. "You're different," he said one evening, as we sat by the fire. "Since the trial." "Different how? Lighter. Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." I thought about his words. They were truer than I wanted to admit. I had spent my entire life carrying the weight of other people's choices. My parents' death. My aunt's charity. Elena's sins. I had absorbed them all, worn them like armor, told myself I was strong enough to bear it, but I wasn't strong. I was just stubborn. And stubborn wasn't the same as free. I started traveling. I had never seen the world beyond the Hazelwood estates and the merchant cities. I had never stood on a mountain peak or looked out over an ocean. I had never tasted food that wasn't salted or spiced to mask its age. I went south first, to the coastal towns where the air smelled of salt and the markets were filled with fish and pearls. I walked along the shore, my bare feet sinking into the wet sand, and I felt something I had never felt before, wonder. I went north next. Not to the frozen outpost where I had died in my past life, but to the mountains where the air was crisp and the snow sparkled like diamonds. I climbed until my legs burned and my lungs ached, and when I reached the summit, I sat down and cried. I cried for the girl I had been, for the years I had lost, for the pain I had endured. And then I stopped crying, and I stood up, and I looked out at the world spread before me. It was beautiful. And it was mine. The war came 7 years later, just as I had remembered. The northern tribes swept south, burning villages and destroying crops. The Hazelwood alliance shattered. The family that had once been so powerful was reduced to rubble. My aunt died in the first wave, her estate looted, her body never recovered. I read the news in a letter from Marcus, who had stayed behind to manage the company. Asterisk, the Hazelwoods are finished. Asterisk, he wrote. There's nothing left of them. I folded the letter and put it in the fire. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel glad either. I just felt nothing. The same nothing I had felt when Elena had been sentenced. The same nothing I had felt when my aunt had visited me in Rivermouth. It was strange, this emptiness. But it wasn't painful. It wasn't cruel. It was just quiet. I had spent so long filling myself with anger and guilt that I had forgotten what it felt like to be still. To just exist without fighting. That now I was learning. I was in a small village in the Western Hills when the letter came. It was from Marjorie. She was old now, too old to travel, too old to work. She wrote to tell me that she was dying and that she wanted to see me one last time. I went to her. She was living in the same cottage on the outskirts of Rivermouth. It was smaller than I remembered, more cramped, more worn. But it was warm, and the fire crackled in the hearth, and Marjorie smiled when she saw me. "Miss Rosalind," she said. "You came?" Of course I came. I sat beside her and took her hand. It was thin, almost boneless, the skin like paper. She looked at me with eyes that were still sharp, still kind. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for everything you did, for showing them that you couldn't be broken." "I wasn't broken," I said. "I was just tired." She laughed, a soft, wheezing sound. "That's the same thing, isn't it? Tired and broken. Until you're not." I squeezed her hand. "You helped me. You gave me the letters. You gave me my freedom. I just told you where they were. You did the rest." She closed her eyes for a moment, and I thought she had fallen asleep. But then she opened them again, and they were brighter than I had seen them in years. "You know," she said, "I never had children. I never married. I gave my whole life to the Hazelwoods, and they never really saw me. They just saw a servant, a tool. You were more than that. I know that now. I knew it when I saw you walk out of that cottage with the letters in your hands. I knew it when I heard that Elena had been sent away." She smiled. "You made me brave, Miss Rosalind. You showed me that it's never too late to choose yourself." I felt tears prick at my eyes. I didn't blink them back this time. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." She died 3 days later, peacefully, in her sleep. I buried her in the cemetery outside Rivermouth, beneath a tree that bloomed with white flowers in the spring. I paid for a headstone and had her name carved into the stone, along with a single line. She chose herself in the end. The weeks after Marjorie's death were quiet. I returned to my house by the river and tried to settle back into my routine. But something had shifted. Something had changed. I thought about Marjorie's words. It's never too late to choose yourself. I had spent my whole life choosing other people. My aunt,
Elena.
the family. I had chosen them over and over again, even when they gave me nothing in return. Even when they took everything I had. And now I had no one to choose but myself. I didn't know what that looked like. I had never done it before, but I was going to try. I closed the company. Not because it was failing, but because it had served its purpose. I had enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I had enough independence to do whatever I wanted. And what I wanted was simple. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the mountains and the oceans and the deserts. I wanted to taste food I had never tasted and hear languages I had never heard. I wanted to meet people who didn't know my past and didn't care about my name. I wanted to live, not just survive. Marcus came with me. He was older now, his hair streaked with gray, his face more lined. But he was still sharp, still loyal, still the best friend I had ever had. Where are we going? He asked, as we packed the last of our bags.
I don't know, I said.
Anywhere. Everywhere. He smiled. That's not a plan.
No.
It's better than a plan. It's a promise. We left Rivermouth at dawn, the city still asleep, the river glittering in the morning light. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was behind me. The future was ahead. And for the first time in my life, I was excited to see what it held.